The coaching habit _ say less. Ask more and change the way you lead forever. Written by Michael Bungay Stanier. Summarized by Detailed Book Summaries. Chapter 1. Build a Habit. If you think coaching means sitting in a glass-walled office asking deep questions while sipping green tea, Michael Bungay Stanier is here to burst that bubble. Coaching, in its most powerful and practical form, is a habit, not a job description, not a separate meeting, not a new thing to add on. It's a way of showing up every day in every conversation. And it starts with breaking a bad habit we don't even know we have, telling too much. We've been wired, especially in leadership, to offer solutions, advice, fixes. The moment someone says, "I've got a problem," most of us light up like Christmas trees. "Oh, you should do this." We say, it feels helpful, efficient, smart, except it doesn't actually help. Stanier points out something subtle but deeply important. Every time we jump in to solve, we take ownership of the problem. And worse, we disempower the person who brought it to us. What we think is supportive is often just a nice way of saying, "You can't figure this out. Let me rescue you." So he challenges us to do something much harder, yet infinitely more powerful. Ask more, say less, and to make that shift, we need to understand what habits actually are. Stanier walks us through the anatomy of a habit. It begins with a trigger, something that cues your brain to act. Then there's the routine, your default behavior. Finally, there's a reward, a payoff that reinforces the cycle. Let's say you get an email with a messy request. The trigger? Ambiguity. The routine? You shoot off a fix. The reward? Relief, control, maybe even praise. But you've just reinforced a habit of solving for others, instead of coaching them to solve with you. What Michael does. So we'll here is strip the theory out of clouds and plant it in our everyday leadership reality. Want to build a coaching habit? Then you got to build new loops. And that takes intention. Stanier's method? Keep it simple. You're not adding time-consuming rituals. You're rewiring micro-moments. Here's the trick. You pick a coaching question, use it often, and tie it to a common trigger. That way, when your colleague shows up with a problem, instead of blurting, "Here's what I do," your brain learns to pause and ask. And the beauty of coaching as a habit? It doesn't require you to change your calendar. You don't need to schedule more meetings. You just show up differently in the ones you're already in. Stanier reminds us, you're busy. You've got a million things to do. But you'll actually be more effective, more impactful, and more trusted if you build this one muscle. Asking questions that invite others to think for themselves. Because the best leaders don't create followers. They create thinkers. He closes a chapter with a clear, no fluff statement. You already talk too much. Now, let's get to work on talking less and leading better. This isn't about becoming a therapist or pretending to be Yoda. This is about building a real-world, real-time coaching habit that will shift the way you show up in conversations, in crises, in moments of tension, and in sparks of innovation, one question at a time. Chapter 2, the Kickstart Question. Let's face it, most workplace conversations are stale, predictable, a carefully rehearsed dance of small talk, passive updates, and veiled requests for help. You ask how things are going, they say fine, and boom, another forgettable interaction slides by. Michael Bungay Stanier wants to kill that cycle. He says if you want real coaching moments, real clarity, real thinking, you need a better way to start. You need a Kickstart question. And it's not complicated. What's on your mind? That's it. 6 words. But they're 6 inviting, open, trust-building words that crack the door wide open for real dialogue. You're not asking for a report. You're not fishing for problems. You're simply making space for whatever matters most to them. Because underneath every surface-level conversation is something more important, more pressing, more emotional. And this one question gently signals, it's safe to bring that here. When you say what's on your mind, you're not just asking about tasks. You're saying, let's skip the fluff. You're asking them to speak from the gut about the thing that's bothering them, or exciting them, or confusing them. Whatever it is, they choose the topic. And that choice gives them ownership. Stanier emphasizes something subtle but game-changing. This question works because it's unstructured. You're not boxing them in. You're giving them permission to go wherever they need to go. And when people are given that kind of runway, the right conversations finally start. It also helps with what he calls the advice monster, that urge we all have to jump in and fix the problem. But when you start with what's on your mind, you're not solving anything yet. You're listening. You're making room. You're telling your brain, not yet. Let them speak. And here's the kicker. People want to talk about what's on their mind. They're carrying it anyway. This question simply invites them to take the weight off for a minute, spread it on the table, and look at it with someone who's actually present. Michael gives you a few tips to make this stick. Use it early. Don't wait for the 10th minute of the meeting. Lead with it. Start strong. Good to see you. What's on your mind? Let them talk. Fight the temptation to hijack the moment. Let it breathe. Silence is your friend here. Listen like it matters. Not just with your ears, but with your posture, your face, your whole energy. Be in it. And when they answer, don't just nod and move on. Stay curious. There's always more. In fact, the next question you ask may go even deeper, but we'll get there in the next chapter. The magic of the Kickstart question is how ordinary it seems, but how powerful it becomes once you commit to it. Use it with your direct reports. Use it with peers. Use it with your kids. Use it in moments when you're tempted to fill the silence with advice. What's on your mind is your ticket out of the surface level shuffle and into meaningful leadership. Because real coaching doesn't happen when you talk more. It happens when you make space. Chapter 4, the focus question. At this point, the conversation's open. You started strong with, what's on your mind? You've dug deeper with, and what else? But here's the thing. Coaching isn't just about opening doors. It's about choosing the right one to walk through. That's where the focus question comes in. And it's just 5 words. What's the real challenge here for you? Michael Bungay Stanier calls it the laser beam of coaching questions. Not because it's aggressive, but because it cuts through the noise, the spirals, the rambling, and gets straight to the heart of things. People love to tell stories. They bring drama, distraction, deflection. And it's not that they're lying. It's that they're unconsciously avoiding the hard stuff, the personal ownership, the uncomfortable reflection, the truth that lives just beneath their first few answers. When you ask, what's the real challenge here for you? You shift the conversation from the external to the internal. You stop them from talking about the situation, the other people, the system, and you bring it back to them. This is where growth happens. Stanier breaks it down like this. There are 3 layers to the question. First, there's what's the challenge here? That alone is a great question. It helps people identify the obstacle. But most people keep it at arm's length. The team is slow. The client won't decide. The process is broken. Next, we add real. What's the real challenge? This forces a little pause, a little reflection. It says, let's go past the surface level excuse. But the punchline? That final phrase. For you? Because the challenge isn't about the team, the client, or the process. It's about the person in front of you, their mindset, their behavior, their part in the problem. That's where coaching lives, in the zone of personal responsibility and change. Here's how this plays out in real time. Let's say your team member says, I'm stuck. Marketing is dragging their feet. You nod, then ask, and what else? They say, well, we've also had delays in product. You say, okay, what's the real challenge here for you? Now they pause. I guess I haven't really stepped up to coordinate across teams. I've just been reacting. Boom. There it is. You didn't call them out. You didn't shame them. You just guided them, gently but precisely, to own their piece of the problem. Stanier says we're often tricked by the first challenge someone presents. It's rarely the real one. And that's why we so often solve the wrong problem. We jump in, fix the surface level drama, and feel good for 5 minutes until the same issue resurfaces next week because the real challenge was never addressed. The focus question saves you from that. It also helps you, the coach, manage your own attention. Because when someone's story gets long or starts looping, this question brings clarity. It draws a line in the sand. I hear all that, but what's the real challenge here for you? Now let's talk about tone. Stanier reminds us, don't ask this like you're a judge. Don't raise an eyebrow or lean in like you're catching someone in a lie. Ask it like a coach, with genuine curiosity, like you're holding a mirror, not a weapon. And one more thing, it's okay to ask it more than once. Sometimes, the first answer just leads to the next layer. They say, I think the challenge is lack of time. You nod, then ask again, okay, and what's the real challenge here for you? I guess I don't delegate well. I hold on to things. That's it. That's the gold. The more often you use this question, the more your conversations become less about firefighting and more about forward movement. Because coaching isn't just about listening or asking any random question. It's about asking the right question, at the right time, in the right way, and helping people find the challenge that actually matters. So next time someone brings you a problem, resist the urge to fix it. Instead, pause and ask with calm, curious confidence, what's the real challenge here for you? That one moment of clarity, it might be the beginning of a breakthrough. Chapter 5, the foundation question. You've asked, what's on your mind? You follow with, and what else? You narrowed in with, what's the real challenge here for you? By now, you're starting to feel it. Conversations have weight. They're not just chatter anymore. There's movement, clarity, focus. But if you want to anchor your coaching, if you want to build trust, motivation, and resilience in one simple move, you need the foundation question. And it goes like this. What do you want? Michael Bungay Stanier says it's both the simplest and the most difficult question to answer. Why? Because most of us don't really know what we want. We know what we don't want. We know what annoys us, frustrates us, distracts us. We're quick to vent, quick to critique. But when someone looks us in the eye and says, no, really, what do you want? We freeze. Because the question asks us to be honest, not just with others, but with ourselves. And that honesty, that's where transformation lives. Stanier points out that asking, what do you want, brings clarity to intention. It moves the conversation from complaint to commitment, from foggy emotion to focused action. It creates space for choice. He also notes that this question unlocks something deeper, adult-to-adult relationships. Too often, our professional interactions slip into one of two traps, parent-child or child-parent. Someone shows up needing approval, rescue, or validation. Or worse, they're playing the parent role, demanding, controlling, over-functioning. It's not always conscious, but it's corrosive. It leads to dependency, frustration, and shallow growth. When you ask, what do you want? You signal something radical. You're the expert of your life. You're capable. You're allowed to name your needs. That one question shifts the power back to them, not as a burden, but as a gift. But here's where it gets real. The answers can be messy. Sometimes people don't know. Sometimes they resist. They'll say, I just want this to stop, or I don't want to deal with it anymore. That's fine. Sit with it. Let the silence do some work. Then gently ask again. Okay, but what do you really want? Stanier also teaches us to listen for layers. Often, the first answer is practical. I want to get the report done. But there's usually more beneath the surface. I want more control over my time. I want recognition. I want to feel like my work matters. And that is the gold. Once someone articulates what they really want, they often realize they've never said out loud before, maybe not even to themselves. And in that moment, they begin to reclaim their own clarity, power, and momentum. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to offer advice. You just have to ask, then listen like it matters. Let's not forget, it's also a question to turn on yourself. What do you want in this conversation? What do you want in this relationship, in this project, in this role? Stanier says this isn't just about being nice or empathetic. It's about avoiding the trap of miscommunication and resentment, because unspoken wants lead to hidden expectations. And hidden expectations are breeding grounds for disappointment. Ask the foundation question often. Ask it with courage. Ask it when things are tense or unclear or stuck. What do you want? Let the weight of that question settle in. Let it change the shape of the conversation. Because when someone answers it, honestly and fully, they shift from victim to author, from reacting to leading. And that's what coaching is really about. Chapter 6, the lazy question. It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? The idea of a lazy question, especially in a book about leadership, about coaching, about unlocking potential. But Michael Bungay Stanier isn't calling you lazy. He's showing you how to stop working so hard doing things that don't work and start leading with more intention. So here it is, the lazy question. How can I help? Just 5 words. Simple, disarming, but absolutely transformational. Why does Stanier call it lazy? Because without this question, we tend to overfunction. We jump in. We take over. We offer solutions before they're needed. We act like mind readers, assuming we know exactly what someone else needs. The lazy question forces us to slow down, step back, and, most importantly, ask before acting. It stops the cycle of unconscious rescuing. You see, most leaders fall into what Stanier calls a drama triangle, a powerful little concept borrowed from psychology. At any given moment, we can fall into one of 3 unhelpful roles. The victim. Why is this happening to me? The persecutor. It's their fault. They're the problem. The rescuer. I'll save you. Stand aside, I've got this. And guess which role leaders love to slip into? The rescuer. It feels noble. It feels needed. It feels like leadership. But in reality, rescuing keeps people dependent, disempowered, and disengaged. You think you're helping, but what you're really doing is taking responsibility that doesn't belong to you. That's where How Can I Help comes in. It's a pattern breaker, a reset. Instead of assuming what someone wants, be it advice, a favor, an opinion, you ask. And in doing so, you do something radical. You invite clarity. You invite ownership. You invite adult-to-adult collaboration. Here's what happens in real conversations. Your colleague walks in, stressed about a project. You're tempted to jump in and offer to fix it. But you pause and ask, how can I help? Maybe they say, honestly, I just needed to vent. Maybe they say, can you help me brainstorm? Maybe they say, I need you to back me up in the meeting tomorrow. Each answer is different. Each one requires a different kind of help. But the real win? You didn't waste time guessing. You didn't strip them of ownership. You didn't pile on more than you should be carrying. Stanier explains that asking how can I help is also a self-management strategy. It helps you avoid burnout. It keeps your calendar from getting hijacked. It stops you from becoming everyone's on-call superhero. Because here's the truth. When you say yes to helping without clarity, you often end up solving the wrong problem or getting resentful. So what happens if someone gives a vague or overwhelming answer? Stanier gives you a fallback line. If I'm saying yes to this, what am I saying no to? That's not selfish. That's strategic. And one more bonus tip. Don't ask a lazy question with a heavy sigh or passive-aggressive tone. Ask it cleanly. No vagi. No hint of obligation. Just honest, open curiosity. How can I help? It communicates support without assumption. It respects boundaries without shutting down generosity. It shifts you from problem solver to possibility partner. And that, Stanier says, is what builds trust, not just in you, but in your people's ability to lead themselves. So don't do more than you need to. Do less, but do it better. Start with a question. Start with, how can I help? Chapter 7, the strategic question. Time. We all want more of it, and yet we waste so much of it. On tasks that don't matter, meetings that go nowhere, conversations that spin in circles. And as a leader, your time isn't just your resource. It's a signal to others. What you say yes to becomes your identity. What you say no to becomes your boundary. That's why Michael Bungay Stanier drops the final hammer in your coaching toolkit. The strategic question. If you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? This is the question that pulls your priorities out of autopilot. It's the one that turns fuzzy commitments into conscious trade-offs. Because every yes carries a cost, and yet most of us give our yes away like we're printing them at home. This question forces clarity. It forces choice. And in a world that's constantly trying to distract you or dilute your focus, choice is everything. Stanier says this isn't about being difficult or pessimistic. It's about being strategic. It's about recognizing that time, energy, and attention are limited, and that pretending otherwise is a leadership lie. When someone says, "Yes, I'll take on that project," it feels good. They're being helpful, ambitious, agreeable. But if you don't ask them what they're saying no to in return, you've just invited them to overload themselves, or worse, underdeliver everywhere. The strategic question introduces intelligent friction. It creates a pause, a moment to ask, what am I actually trading off here? And that pause, that's where wise decisions live. Stanier tells us that this question is a form of adult thinking. It prevents people from reacting with emotion, people-pleasing, or knee-jerk compliance. Instead, it makes them evaluate, to own their capacity, to weigh their true priorities. And it's not just about time management. It's about identity management. Because when you start saying yes to everything, you stop being clear about who you are and what you're here to do. Let's say your team member says, "Yes, I'll jump in on this initiative." You nod, then ask, "And what are you saying no to?" Now the real coaching begins. They might say, "Well, I guess that means I won't be able to finalize the client presentation this week." Boom, that's a decision. And now it's out in the open. Stanier emphasizes that this doesn't mean you punish people for saying yes. It just means you help them hold up a mirror to their workload, their assumptions, their habits. It also protects you from slipping into people-pleaser mode. If someone asks for your time, your energy, your buy-in, don't just nod. Ask yourself, what would I have to say no to in order to say yes to this? If the trade-off is worth it, go ahead. If not, you just save yourself and them from a subtle derailment. This question is strategic because it forces intentional trade-offs, not accidental sacrifices. Stanier reminds us, strategy is choice, and choice is where leadership lives. So don't say yes blindly. Ask this question. Let it echo in your decisions. And watch how quickly you move from being busy to being brilliantly focused. If you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? Say it out loud. Ask it often. Let it change the way your people think and the way you lead. Chapter 8, The Learning Question. You've asked the Kickstart. You've gone deeper with AWE. You've cut to the core with the focus question. You've uncovered desire, clarified help, and made trade-offs visible. But coaching doesn't end when a conversation does. In fact, what happens after the conversation is what matters most. That's why we arrive at the final tool in this habit-building arsenal. The learning question, what was most useful for you? It might seem like a wrap-up, a polite way to close, but it's not. It's a power move. Michael Bungay Stanier calls this the question that makes everything stick. Because here's the thing. People don't learn when you tell them something. They learn when they reflect on what just happened. Let's pause there for a second. We spend so much time trying to deliver the right advice, the right solution, the right insight. But that's not where transformation happens. Real change takes root when someone stops, looks back, and names the value for themselves. That's what the learning question does. By asking, what was most useful for you? You're giving them space to capture the insight, the shift, the aha moment in their own words. Not only does this cement the learning, it also gives them ownership of it. It's no longer your coaching session. It becomes their realization. Stanier points out that this question is the cleanest way to finish strong. It's not self-indulgent. You're not fishing for praise. You're guiding them to reflect on what just happened and why it mattered. And it's important to keep the question crisp. Not, was this helpful? Or, do you think you got something out of this? Those are yes or no questions that go nowhere. What was most useful for you is sharp, direct, and reflective. It signals that the conversation wasn't just a chat. It was an experience. It invites people to treat their time with you as valuable. And here's the twist. It helps you become a better coach. Because when people answer this question, they reveal what actually resonated, what landed, what worked. You may have thought your clever metaphor or that story you told was a highlight, but they might say, honestly, when you asked what the real challenge was for me, that's when it clicked. Now you're learning too. The learning question turns every coaching moment into a feedback loop. You grow, they grow, and more importantly, The impact of the conversation continues long after it's over. Stanier also mentions this. Reflection creates motivation. When someone ends a conversation thinking, that was helpful, they're far more likely to come back to you again. You become a person who brings clarity, not chaos. Questions, not control. Growth, not answers. It also creates closure. You've led them through a meaningful exchange. They've unpacked thoughts, named needs, clarified intentions. Now they get to pause, breathe, and harvest the learning. What was most useful for you isn't a throwaway line. It's a habit-forming tool, a reinforcement strategy, a leadership signature. So next time you wrap up a conversation, whether it was 5 minutes or 50, don't just say, "Great, thanks." Look them in the eye and ask, what was most useful for you? Let them say it. Let them own it. Let the learning land. Because coaching isn't about having the right answers. It's about helping someone find the answer that sticks with them. Chapter 9, Building a Coaching Habit. So you've learned the questions. You've felt their power, the kickstart, the AWE, the focus, the foundation, the lazy, the strategic, and the learning question. Each one sharp. Each one simple. Each one able to slice through noise, ego, and ambiguity like a hot knife through cold butter. But now comes a real challenge. Not learning the questions, living them. Because, as Michael Bungay Stanier puts it, insight without action is just a good idea on a shelf. If you want to make coaching a habit, not just a tool you use when you remember, you have to embed it into the way you lead every day. This isn't about trying harder. It's not about becoming more disciplined overnight. And it's definitely not about being perfect. It's about behavior. And all behavior, Stanier reminds us, lives in a loop. Cue, routine, reward. Let's say your cue is that moment you feel the tension to fix something, to jump in, give advice, show how smart you are. That moment is gold. Because instead of reacting, you pause. You recognize the urge. You name it. That's the advice monster. And then you choose a new routine. You ask the question. Maybe it's, what's the real challenge here for you? Maybe it's, and what else? You don't have to get fancy. You just have to stay curious. And here's where the reward kicks in. You see them think differently. You hear them reflect. You feel the conversation shift. You both walk away with clarity instead of confusion, movement instead of mess. That's your brain's reward loop lighting up. And when that happens again and again, the new habit begins to stick. But habit building takes more than just good intentions. Stanier offers 3 truths that help coaching become a consistent rhythm. First, start small. Don't make the mistake of thinking you have to overhaul your leadership style in a day. Pick one question. Just one. Use it in your next meeting, your next one-on-one, your next coffee break. Make it part of your language, your posture, your reflex. Second, practice often. Habits form not through thinking, but through doing. So don't wait for the perfect moment to coach. Don't save your questions for formal reviews or big breakdowns. Ask them casually. Ask them quickly. Ask them in real time. Repetition isn't boring. It's where mastery lives. Third, be kind to yourself. You're going to forget. You're going to slip back into old patterns, talking too much, fixing too fast, trying to impress. That's not failure. That's the path. Every time you notice it, you're strengthening the habit. Reflection is part of the growth. And if there's one thing to watch for, the thing that will sabotage all of this, it's the advice monster. That inner voice that says, you know the answer. Just tell them. That part of you that feels clever, helpful, important when you swoop in to save the day. But saving isn't serving. And giving answers, especially when no one asked, isn't coaching. It's just noise dressed as wisdom. That's why the best coaches don't see themselves as heroes. They're guides. They create space for others to think clearly, act bravely, and learn deeply. And they do it not with long speeches, but with short, potent questions. Stanier reminds us, leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about creating the conditions for others to find their own. So how do you make this stick? You commit to the habit, not the hype. You ask instead of tell. You slow down just enough to wonder what's really needed here. And then you coach, not as a role or a job title, but as a way of being. Because when you lead with questions, you build trust. When you resist the urge to fix, you grow people. And when you practice curiosity every day, in every room, you don't just become a better coach. You become the kind of leader people actually want to follow. Chapter 10, Living the Coaching Habit. So here you are. You've come this far, not just reading, but listening with intent, absorbing the cadence of a new kind of leadership. You've learned the 7 questions. You've seen how they slice through confusion, how they nudge people into clarity, how they strip back layers of drama, habit, and noise to reveal something true. But here's the thing. Knowledge doesn't change people. Habits do. If you want to lead differently, if you want to coach rather than control, if you want to make a real impact, not someday but right now, then you must take this book and turn it into a behavior. That doesn't mean adding more to your plate. It means switching out what doesn't work for something that does. Let's break it down. You got the Kickstart Question. What's on your mind? This is your opener, your invitation. You don't need a big monologue. You need curiosity. Just start there and let the conversation reveal itself. You got the AWE question. And what else? This is your magic wand, the conversation deepener. It stops you from moving too fast. It pulls out hidden layers. Use it more often than feels natural. You got the focus question. What's the real challenge here for you? This one stops the storytelling. It zeroes in. No more wandering. No more blaming. Just the truth, personal and pointed. You got the foundation question. What do you want? Simple, direct, and tough. Because most people haven't asked themselves that in years. Use it to spark clarity, and don't flinch when they hesitate. You got the lazy question. How can I help? Stop assuming. Stop overfunctioning. Ask the question. Let people tell you what they actually need. You'll save time, energy, and misunderstanding. You got the strategic question. If you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? Say it in every meeting, every decision, every rush commitment. Make trade-offs visible. Anchor your time in what really matters. And finally, the learning question. What was most useful for you? End strong. Seal the conversation. Let the insight stick. Let them own it. Together, these aren't tricks. They're not scripts. They're not things you try when things go wrong. They're a mindset, a method, a way of being in conversation with others. And now, after listening, reflecting, nodding, you have a decision to make. You can close this chapter, nod with appreciation, and move on. Or you can decide that from this point forward, you'll lead with questions, not to stall, not to be soft, but to sharpen the conversation, to unlock autonomy, to create space where your team, your partner, your client, hell, even yourself, can think better, choose better, and grow on purpose. And as you do this, you'll notice something surprising. You're working less hard, but having more impact. You're talking less, but people are thinking more. You're fixing fewer problems, and yet they're getting solved. Why? Because you stopped trying to be the smartest person in the room and became the most curious. That's coaching. And if you build this into your everyday flow, not just in performance reviews or team huddles, but in emails, in hallway chats, in Zoom calls, you will reshape not only how people work with you, but how they work with themselves. So start today. Pick one question. Ask it with care. Then listen. And let that be the beginning of your coaching habit. Not as something you do, but as who you are,